Listen closely, my friends. The hardest moment in your life may not be when everything falls apart. It may be the moment you realize that the person you were waiting for was never coming. No hand is going to reach through the darkness and pull you toward the life you keep imagining. And sooner or later, you have to decide whether you will remain there or rise by yourself. Because there is a dangerous comfort in waiting for rescue. It allows you to blame time, circumstances, people, and fate, while your own life quietly moves forward without you. And while you keep hoping someone will arrive, your potential can slowly become a graveyard of things you could have built. The Stoics understood a truth that most people spend their entire lives trying to escape. Your life becomes powerful when you stop placing its direction in someone else's hands. They didn't believe strength came from having everyone beside you. They believed strength came from knowing that even when everyone disappears, your character remains. Marcus Aurelius could command an empire, but he could not command life to spare him from loss, betrayal, illness, war, or death. And yet he kept returning to the one territory he could govern, himself. That is where real independence begins. Not when you stop loving people, but when you stop requiring someone else to carry the weight of your existence. Think about a ship lost in the middle of a violent ocean. If the captain spends every moment staring at the horizon, waiting for another vessel to rescue him, the storm will make the decision for him. But the moment he grips the wheel, studies the waves, adjusts the sails, and accepts responsibility for the next direction, something changes, even though the ocean remains exactly as dangerous. Your circumstances can be the same. The storm may not disappear, the support may not arrive, and the road may remain brutally uncertain. But the person holding the wheel can change everything. And this is where Stoicism becomes more than philosophy. It becomes a way of living when life refuses to give you the conditions you wanted. Epictetus taught that freedom begins with understanding what belongs to you and what does not. Other people's choices, opinions, and actions are not yours to command, but your judgment, your response, and your next action remain yours. Seneca warned about the preciousness of time, because every hour spent waiting for someone else to fix your life is an hour you can never purchase back. The Stoic does not ask, "Who will save me?" The Stoic asks, "What can I do with what is in my hands right now?" Maybe you've been waiting for someone to believe in you before you begin. Maybe you've been waiting for the right opportunity, the right relationship, the right circumstances, the right amount of motivation, or simply for life to become easier before you finally become serious about yourself. But what if the delay is not protecting you? It is training you to remain dependent. What if the life you want is waiting on a decision that nobody else can make for you? In this video, we are going to uncover 10 striking lessons that will completely change the way you understand solitude, responsibility, discipline, rejection, independence, and self-mastery. These lessons will not teach you to hate people, isolate yourself, or pretend that you need nobody. They will teach you something far more powerful: how to stand on your own feet without becoming emotionally dependent on someone else's presence. Because people may walk beside you, they may encourage you, love you, guide you, and even help you carry the weight for a while, but nobody can live your life for you. And once you truly understand that, being alone will no longer feel like abandonment. It will begin to feel like freedom. Lesson 1. Stop waiting to be saved. There is a moment when waiting stops being patience and becomes surrender. You keep telling yourself that someone will come, something will change, an opportunity will appear, or the right person will finally recognize what you are capable of. But while you are waiting for rescue, life is still moving, the clock is still turning, and the person you could become is being delayed by a decision you keep refusing to make. The most dangerous prison is not always built with walls. Sometimes it is built from the belief that your life cannot begin until someone else gives you permission. The Stoics understood that the first step toward freedom was accepting reality without demanding that reality become convenient. Epictetus taught his students to separate what belongs to their control from what does not, because the moment you depend on another person's decision for your peace, you hand them a piece of your freedom. You cannot command someone to believe in you, stay with you, understand you, rescue you, or open a door for you. But you can decide what you will do with the door that remains closed. You can knock again, build another door, change direction, or walk toward a completely different path. Imagine a soldier standing before a battlefield, staring behind him and waiting for someone to arrive before he moves forward. The enemy does not care that he is waiting. The ground does not care that he is afraid. Time does not pause because he is uncertain. At some point he must decide whether he will remain frozen or become responsible for the next step. Your life works the same way. The world will not always give you the signal you want before you begin, and sometimes courage is simply moving before certainty arrives. Marcus Aurelius lived surrounded by responsibility that could not be postponed. He faced war, political pressure, personal loss, illness, and betrayal, yet his philosophy repeatedly returned him to the present duty in front of him. He could not control every event surrounding the empire, but he could control the quality of the person standing inside those events. That distinction is everything. A powerful life does not begin when circumstances finally cooperate. It begins when you stop using uncooperative circumstances as an excuse to abandon your responsibility. Think about a seed buried beneath the earth. It does not wait for the soil to become comfortable before it begins pushing upward. It does not complain that there is darkness above it. It simply responds to the nature of its existence by growing. There is a lesson hidden inside that silence. Sometimes the environment will not announce that you are ready, and nobody will arrive to tell you that your time has come. You must begin with the strength you have, in the conditions you have, while carrying the uncertainty you have. This does not mean you should reject help or pretend that you need nobody. Stoicism was never a philosophy of becoming emotionally empty or hostile toward humanity. It is about refusing to make another person's presence the foundation of your ability to move forward. You can appreciate support without becoming dependent on it. You can love someone without making them responsible for your purpose. You can walk beside people while still knowing that the responsibility for your character ultimately belongs to you. So stop asking, "Who is going to save me?" Ask something harder. What am I capable of doing right now? That question returns power to your hands. Maybe you cannot change your entire life today, but you can change the next hour. You can make the call, begin the work, learn the skill, leave the destructive habit, finish what you promised yourself, or take the first uncomfortable step toward the person you want to become. The mountain does not care how many times you stare at it. Eventually you have to take the first step. Because the person you have been waiting for may not be coming, and that realization does not have to break you. It can release you. The moment you understand that nobody is responsible for becoming the hero of your story, you finally stop sitting on the sidelines, waiting for your life to begin. You pick up the responsibility yourself. And once you become the person who can move forward without being carried, you discover something far more powerful than rescue. You discover that you were capable of standing all along. Lesson 2. Take complete responsibility. There is a moment when your life begins to change, not when your circumstances become easier, but when you stop waiting for someone else to take responsibility for what happens next. As long as you keep saying, "They did this to me, I didn't have the opportunity," Nobody supported me. You may be describing real pain, but you are also placing the steering wheel of your future in someone else's hands. Responsibility does not mean pretending that what happened to you was fair. It means refusing to let what happened to you become the permanent author of who you become. The Stoics understood this distinction with extraordinary precision. Epictetus knew that some circumstances could be brutally unfair, yet he kept returning to the territory that remained his judgment, his choices, and his response. You may not control who betrays you, who rejects you, who leaves you, or what opportunity disappears, but there is a space between the event and your response, and inside that space lives your freedom. The world can wound you without being given permission to define you. Imagine a ship caught in a violent current. The captain cannot command the ocean to become calm. He cannot negotiate with the wind or order the waves to disappear. But he can adjust the sails, change the angle, study the current, and decide how to navigate the storm. A weak captain spends the entire journey cursing the ocean. A disciplined captain asks, "Given the conditions in front of me, what can I control?" That is the Stoic mind. It doesn't waste its strength demanding a different reality before it begins acting. Marcus Aurelius lived under enormous pressure, yet his philosophy repeatedly pulled him back toward duty rather than complaint. Imagine having the power of an emperor and still being unable to command illness, death, betrayal, or time itself. That reality could have made him bitter. Instead, it became a reminder that external power is limited. You can control an empire and still fail to control yourself. But if you can control yourself, even when the empire around you is collapsing, you possess something far more difficult to take away. This is where responsibility becomes uncomfortable. It means you sometimes have to admit that your own habits are part of the problem. Maybe you keep procrastinating. Maybe you keep returning to people who drain you. Maybe you keep blaming circumstances while refusing to change the actions that are actually within your control. The mind would rather protect its excuses than examine its weaknesses, but growth begins when you become brave enough to say, "This part is mine." Not because everything is your fault, but because something is still your responsibility. And responsibility does not require you to carry the entire future on your shoulders at once. It begins with the next decision. If you wasted yesterday, what will you do today? If someone hurt you, how will you respond? If you failed, what will you learn? If nobody supports your dream, what action can you still take? The Stoic does not need to control the whole road before taking the next step. He only needs to govern the step that belongs to him. Think of a blacksmith holding a piece of raw iron. He cannot complain that the metal isn't already a sword. It isn't supposed to be. He places it in the fire, strikes it, reshapes it, reheats it, and strikes it again. The material becomes useful through disciplined transformation. Your circumstances are similar. You may not have been given the life you wanted, the opportunities you wanted, or the support you wanted. But the question remains, what are you going to forge from what you were given? The moment you take complete responsibility, something inside you becomes quieter. You stop waiting for apologies before moving forward. You stop needing perfect circumstances before beginning. You stop demanding that other people change before you can have peace. You may still feel the pain, but you no longer give the pain control of the steering wheel. You stop asking who ruined your life and start asking what you will build from here. Because responsibility is not a punishment. It is power returning to your hands. Lesson 3. Learn to walk without applause. There is a version of weakness that looks like ambition from the outside. You work hard, you chase goals, you build yourself, but somewhere inside, you're still waiting for someone to notice. You want the recognition, the praise, the message that says you are doing well, the people who finally admit they underestimated you. But if your discipline needs an audience, then silence will eventually defeat it. The moment nobody is watching is the moment your character is revealed. The Stoics understood that applause is one of the most unstable currencies a human being can depend on. Seneca warned against allowing the crowd to become the judge of your life, because crowds change their minds with the wind. Today they praise you, tomorrow they criticize you. Today they call you disciplined, tomorrow they call you strange. If your identity rises and falls with their opinions, you are not living from your principles, you are living from their reactions. A free mind does not need permission from the crowd to remain itself. Imagine a mountain standing beneath an empty sky. No audience gathers around it every morning. Nobody applauds its height. Nobody tells it that it is impressive. The mountain simply remains what it is through seasons of sunlight, rain, darkness, and snow. That is how your discipline should become. You should be able to work when nobody knows, improve when nobody cares, and continue when there is no immediate reward. The absence of applause should not become the presence of an excuse. Think about the ancient Stoic philosopher Cleanthes, who reportedly worked physically demanding jobs while pursuing philosophy because he had little money. He didn't wait for the world to create perfect conditions before becoming who he wanted to become. His life carries a powerful lesson. Sometimes the beginning of greatness looks completely unimpressive. Nobody sees the early mornings, the sacrifices, the repetition, or the years of preparation. The world usually notices the fruit, not the roots. This is why you must become comfortable doing things that produce no immediate evidence of success. Read when nobody knows you're learning. Train when nobody sees the workout. Build when nobody understands what you're building. Walk away from what destroys you, even if nobody applauds the decision. There will be seasons where your progress feels invisible, and those seasons can become the most important part of your transformation because they force you to discover whether you actually believe in your purpose or merely enjoy being praised for pursuing it. And be careful of another trap: proving people wrong. It can feel powerful at first. Someone doubts you, and suddenly you become obsessed with showing them what they missed. But eventually, even that becomes another form of dependence. You are still allowing them to control your direction. The highest form of freedom is not proving your critics wrong. It is reaching a point where their opinion no longer determines what you do. So ask yourself a difficult question. If nobody ever praised you for becoming better, would you still become better? If the answer is yes, you are beginning to build something real. Because when your reason becomes internal, criticism loses its ability to stop you, and applause loses its ability to control you. You don't need the world to understand every step. You need to know why you are taking it. Eventually, the noise fades. The people who doubted you move on. The people who praised you move on. The audience changes. The world becomes distracted by something else. And you are left alone with the person you built when nobody was watching. That person is your real achievement. Lesson 4. Become comfortable with solitude. There is a difference between being alone and being abandoned, but most people never learn it. The moment the room becomes quiet, they reach for their phone. The moment nobody texts them, they search for attention. The moment they have to sit with their own thoughts, they run toward noise. But if you constantly need other people to escape yourself, then their presence is not companionship anymore. It has become a form of dependence, and a mind that cannot stand alone will eventually become controlled by whoever is willing to stay. The Stoics treated solitude differently. For them, stepping away from the noise was not a rejection of humanity, it was a return to the self. Marcus Aurelius wrote about retreating into the inner self, because even an emperor surrounded by thousands of people could still lose himself in the noise of the world. Imagine the contradiction. A man with armies, servants, advisors, and an empire around him, yet still needing to find a quiet place within his own mind. Because the deepest loneliness is not having nobody around you, it is being surrounded by everyone and still being unable to hear yourself. Think of a deep forest after sunset. At first, the silence feels uncomfortable because you are used to constant movement and noise. Every small sound becomes noticeable. But if you remain there long enough, your senses begin to change. You start hearing things that were always there. The wind moving through branches, distant footsteps, the rhythm of your own breathing. Solitude works the same way. When the noise disappears, uncomfortable truths become audible. And instead of escaping them, the Stoic learns to sit with them, examine them, and decide what deserves to remain. Seneca understood the value of withdrawing from the crowd to examine one's life. He knew that constant exposure to other people's desires could quietly become your own desires. You start wanting what they want, fearing what they fear, chasing what they chase, and measuring yourself by standards you never consciously chose. Solitude gives you the terrifying opportunity to ask, if nobody could see my life, what would I actually choose? That question can destroy an artificial identity and reveal a real one. This is why being alone can become a form of strength. When you can eat alone without feeling rejected, work alone without needing praise, walk alone without needing someone beside you, and spend an evening without desperately searching for distraction, something changes inside you. You stop treating your own company like an emergency. You become less desperate for attention, less vulnerable to manipulation, and less willing to remain around people who damage your peace simply because you fear being alone. But solitude is not about becoming cold. It is not about cutting everyone out and pretending you are stronger because you need nobody. That is not strength. Sometimes it is simply another mask for fear. The Stoic understands that human beings are social by nature. The goal is not to need nobody. The goal is to stop needing somebody so badly that you betray yourself to keep them. Imagine a tree growing on a cliff, far from the forest around it. Its roots go deep into the earth because the wind is stronger where it stands. It does not survive because the wind is gentle. It survives because its roots have learned to hold. Your inner life needs those roots. If your peace depends entirely on messages, approval, companionship, attention, or validation, the moment those things disappear, you collapse. But if your foundation is internal, people can come and go without taking your identity with them. So learn to sit in the silence you once feared. Put the phone away. Walk without headphones. Spend time without performing for anyone. Let your thoughts rise without immediately obeying them. Ask yourself what you are avoiding, what you actually value, what habits are destroying your future, and what kind of person you're becoming when nobody is watching. Solitude becomes powerful when you stop using it to escape the world and start using it to understand yourself. Because one day, you may lose someone's attention. You may lose a relationship, a friendship, a position, a crowd, or an entire chapter of your life. If you have never learned how to stand alone, that loss can feel like the end of your identity. But if you have built a home inside your own character, you can grieve without disappearing. Learn to be alone, not because you need less love, but because you need less fear. Lesson 5. Stop needing permission. One of the quietest ways to lose your life is to keep waiting for permission to become who you already know you should be. You wait for your family to understand, your friends to approve, your partner to support the decision, your audience to believe in you, or the world to finally tell you that you're ready. And while you wait for that permission, another year disappears. The tragedy is not that people didn't believe in you. The tragedy is that you allowed their disbelief to become your own. The Stoics understood that your character cannot be built by committee. Epictetus did not teach people to ask the crowd what they should think before they thought it. He taught them to examine their judgments and distinguish what truly belonged to them from what belonged to the outside world. If every decision requires approval, then the person giving the approval is quietly becoming the master of your life. You may call it advice, but when you cannot move without it, it has become dependence. Think of an ancient sculptor standing before a block of marble. He doesn't ask the stone whether it feels ready to become a statue. He doesn't wait for the crowd to approve the shape before making the first strike. He studies the material, sees what must be removed, and begins. Every strike creates resistance. Every mistake demands adjustment. Yet the sculpture emerges because someone was willing to act before the finished form was visible. Your future works the same way. You will not always see the person you're becoming before you begin becoming them. There is another danger hidden inside the need for permission. You start choosing a life that is impressive to others instead of meaningful to yourself. You take the career people respect. You stay in relationships because leaving would disappoint people. You hide your ambition because it might sound unrealistic. You silence your instincts because someone might call you selfish. Eventually, you become very good at being acceptable while becoming increasingly unfamiliar to yourself. A life built entirely around approval can look successful from the outside and feel empty from within. Marcus Aurelius had enormous public responsibility, yet Stoic philosophy repeatedly brought him back to an internal standard. What is the right action? What does my character require? Not, will everyone like this? Not, will they praise me? Not, will this make me look powerful? The question was deeper. What is worthy of the person I am trying to become? That is the question that gives a human being an internal compass when the crowd becomes loud. But understand the difference between courage and arrogance. Not needing permission does not mean refusing all advice. A disciplined mind listens, considers, learns, and then decides. You can respect another person's wisdom without surrendering your judgment to them. The Stoic does not become stubborn because he wants to prove his independence. He becomes internally governed because he understands that the final responsibility for his choices cannot be transferred to someone else. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast desert with two roads ahead. One road is crowded because everyone else is walking there. The other is almost empty, uncertain, and difficult to read. The crowd tells you the empty road is foolish, but they cannot see what you see on the horizon. At some point you must decide whether you want the comfort of being understood or the courage of following what you genuinely believe is right. Sometimes the road that transforms you is the road nobody around you has permission to understand. So stop waiting for someone to tell you that you are ready. Start before you feel ready. Learn before you feel qualified. Build before anyone believes in the result. Make the decision, accept the consequences, correct your mistakes, and keep moving. Your life cannot be lived through the approval of people who will never experience the consequences of your choices. Because the moment you stop asking, do they approve of me, and start asking, am I proud of the person my choices are creating, something changes. You stop living for permission and start living by principle. Lesson 6. Build yourself in silence. The most powerful transformation in your life may happen during a season when nobody knows you are changing. No announcement, no applause, no audience, no dramatic declaration that you are finally becoming disciplined. Just quiet mornings, difficult decisions, repeated effort, and thousands of moments where you choose the person you want to become over the person you have always been. Because real transformation rarely makes noise while it is happening. It becomes visible only after the work is finished. The Stoics understood the danger of performing your character for other people. Marcus Aurelius did not need to announce that he was becoming disciplined every morning. He needed to practice discipline when nobody was watching. Seneca repeatedly warned about wasting life chasing the opinions and approval of the crowd. Their philosophy was not about looking powerful, it was about becoming governed from within. If your discipline needs to be witnessed, your discipline is still dependent on the witness. Think about a tree growing beneath the surface before anyone sees its height. For years, the roots can expand in darkness while the outside world sees almost nothing. Someone walking past may think nothing is happening, but beneath the soil, the foundation is becoming deeper, stronger, and more capable of surviving storms. Your character develops the same way. The months when nobody notices your progress may be the months when you are building the foundation that will eventually make your progress impossible to ignore. There is something psychologically dangerous about announcing every intention before you have earned it. You tell everyone you are changing, and for a moment, you receive the emotional reward of being seen as disciplined. But then the actual work begins, and the excitement disappears. You already received the applause without completing the transformation. Sometimes silence protects your ambition from the pleasure of pretending you have already achieved it. Let the work remain unfinished until the results can speak for themselves. Look at the ancient craftsman shaping a piece of marble. He does not strike the stone once and demand a masterpiece. He removes a little, studies it, strikes again, removes another fragment, and repeats the process. Most of the transformation happens through actions so small that no individual strike looks impressive. Yet thousands of ordinary strikes eventually reveal something extraordinary. Your habits work exactly the same way. One disciplined morning may feel insignificant, but repeated for years, it becomes identity. This is why you should become suspicious of your need to show people that you are improving. You don't need to post every sacrifice. You don't need to explain every boundary. You don't need to announce every goal. You don't need to convince people that you are serious. The strongest evidence of transformation is not what you say you are doing. It is what your life eventually makes impossible to deny. And silence also gives you something most people desperately lack: space to fail privately and learn without humiliation. When you build quietly, mistakes become information instead of public embarrassment. You can change direction without having to explain yourself to everyone. You can start again without an audience watching your failure. You can experiment, struggle, disappear for a while, and return stronger. The Stoic understands that improvement is more important than appearance. Imagine iron inside a furnace. From the outside, it looks like an ordinary piece of metal being consumed by heat. But the heat is changing its structure, making it capable of becoming something stronger. Your difficult season may look like nothing from the outside. People may not understand why you are quieter, why you are working more, why you are saying no, why you are walking away from distractions. Let them misunderstand. Not every transformation requires an explanation. So build quietly, wake up and do the work. Study when nobody cares. Practice when nobody is impressed. Improve when nobody is watching. Let rejection become fuel. Let solitude become training. And let discipline become so ordinary that you no longer need motivation to perform it. One day, People may look at the person you became and call it sudden. They will see the result, but they will never see the thousands of silent decisions that created it. And that is exactly how it should be. Don't announce the person you're becoming. Become them. Lesson 7. Stop fearing being misunderstood. One of the most expensive things you can do with your life is constantly reshape yourself so other people can understand you. You explain why you changed, why you left, why you became quieter, why you stopped chasing certain things, why you no longer tolerate what you once tolerated. But the more desperately you try to make everyone understand your choices, the more you begin adjusting those choices to satisfy them. Sometimes the price of being understood is becoming someone you were never meant to be. The Stoics understood that public opinion was one of the most unstable forces a human being could build an identity around. Epictetus taught his students to focus on what belongs to their own judgment, rather than becoming slaves to the judgments of others. Imagine building your character on a foundation that changes every time someone criticizes you. One person's approval raises you, another person's rejection destroys you, and suddenly strangers are holding the remote control to your emotions. That is not freedom. That is dependence disguised as social acceptance. Think about a lighthouse standing alone against the sea. Waves crash against it, winds scream around it, darkness surrounds it, and ships pass without ever knowing what storms the lighthouse has endured. Yet it does not change its light, because one ship dislikes its direction. It remains where it was built, performing the purpose it was built to perform. Your principles should become like that. People may misunderstand your boundaries, your discipline, your silence, or your ambition, but their misunderstanding does not automatically make your path wrong. There is a reason transformation often creates distance between you and the people who knew your old identity. When you stop participating in certain habits, the people who benefited from those habits may feel uncomfortable. When you become disciplined, someone may call you obsessed. When you become quiet, someone may call you arrogant. When you stop accepting disrespect, someone may say you changed. And maybe you did, but not every change is betrayal. Sometimes changing is the evidence that you finally stopped betraying yourself. Seneca understood that the crowd could pull a person away from his own judgment simply through constant exposure. You begin by listening to everyone's opinion, then comparing yourself to everyone, then measuring your choices against everyone, until eventually you cannot hear your own conscience beneath the noise. This is why solitude and self-reflection matter. You need moments where the crowd disappears so you can ask the question that matters most. If nobody could judge me, would I still choose this life? And this does not mean becoming arrogant or refusing correction. A Stoic should be willing to hear criticism, because wisdom requires the ability to discover your own blindness. But there is a difference between receiving criticism and surrendering your identity to it. Listen carefully, examine honestly, keep what is true, discard what is false, and continue. You don't have to defend every decision you make to people who will never carry its consequences. Imagine a river carving its way through a canyon. The river does not stop every few miles to ask the rocks whether they approve of its direction. It encounters resistance, changes its movement when necessary, and continues toward the sea. Years later, the canyon itself becomes evidence of that persistence. Your life can be the same. You don't need everyone to understand the direction you are taking. You need enough conviction to keep moving while remaining humble enough to correct your course when reality proves you wrong. So stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. Stop chasing approval from people who only respect you when you remain convenient. Stop shrinking your ambition because someone else is uncomfortable with your growth. And stop confusing being disliked with being wrong. Sometimes the person you become will be unfamiliar to the people who benefited from the person you used to be. One day, you may realize that the people you were desperately trying to convince were never supposed to be convinced. Your responsibility was never to make everyone understand your journey. Your responsibility was to walk it with integrity. Let them misunderstand you. Just don't misunderstand yourself. Lesson 8. Become the person you can rely on. The deepest form of loneliness is not having nobody beside you. It is knowing that even when you are beside yourself, you cannot trust the person you have become. You promise yourself you will wake up early, and you don't. You promise you will stop the habit, and you return to it. You promise you will finish what you started, and the first wave of discomfort makes you disappear. Slowly, something inside you begins to break. Not your ambition, but your trust in yourself. The Stoics understood that character is not built through intentions. It is built through repeated action. Marcus Aurelius didn't become disciplined because he wrote beautiful thoughts about discipline. His philosophy was valuable because he tried to practice it while dealing with the chaos of real life. The same principle applies to you. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you cast another stone into the foundation of your character. Every time you betray that promise without necessity, you weaken that foundation. Self-respect is not something you demand from yourself. It is something you earn from yourself. Imagine an ancient bridge built across a violent river. Nobody trusts the bridge because someone says it is strong. They trust it because it has carried weight repeatedly without collapsing. Your mind works the same way. You cannot simply tell yourself, "I am disciplined now," and expect deep confidence to appear. Your brain needs evidence. Wake up when you said you would. Finish the task when you promised. Keep training when motivation disappears. Make small commitments and keep them until your mind begins to understand. When I give myself my word, I mean it. This is why enormous goals can sometimes become distractions. You imagine changing your entire life overnight, create a perfect plan, feel powerful for a few hours, and then collapse when reality becomes ordinary again. The Stoics valued daily practice because philosophy was not supposed to remain inside the mind. It was supposed to become behavior. You don't need to prove that you can conquer your entire future today. You need to prove that you can govern the next decision. Think about a Roman soldier sharpening a blade. He does not wait until the battlefield to discover whether the weapon is sharp. The preparation happens before the crisis. Your daily habits are your preparation. When pressure arrives, you will not suddenly become a completely different person. You will usually fall back on what you have repeatedly practiced. The character you build in ordinary moments becomes the character you carry into extraordinary ones. And this is where your relationship with failure must change. When you break a promise to yourself, don't turn one failure into an identity. Don't say, "I always quit," or "I'm just lazy," or "I'll never change." That language turns an event into a prison. Instead, examine the failure like a Stoic would examine a mistake. What happened? Where did I lose control? What decision created this result? What can I change before the same situation appears again? You are not required to be perfect. You are required to become honest enough to learn. There is immense power in becoming someone who can depend on himself without becoming isolated from others. You can accept help and still be self-reliant. You can love people and still keep your promises to yourself. You can rest without abandoning your discipline. You can fall apart for a moment without deciding to remain broken. The goal is not to become some emotionless machine. The goal is to become the kind of person who can feel everything and still return to what matters. Start smaller than your ego wants. Make one promise today that is difficult but realistic, and keep it. Then make another tomorrow. Let your confidence come from evidence instead of imagination. Eventually, something changes. You stop needing constant motivation because your identity begins doing the work automatically. You no longer have to ask whether you are capable of continuing. You have memories of yourself continuing when it was difficult, and then the meaning of "nobody is coming" changes completely, because you realize you don't need to wait for a hero to appear. You are becoming the person you can finally trust to show up. Lesson 9. Learn to move without certainty. Most people are not afraid of failure as much as they are afraid of moving without knowing what happens next. They want guarantees before commitment, evidence before effort, certainty before courage. So they stand at the edge of their own future, studying the darkness and calling it preparation. But life rarely gives you the entire map before you begin. Sometimes the next step becomes visible only after you have the courage to take the step before it. The Stoics understood that uncertainty was not a mistake in life, it was part of life. Marcus Aurelius could plan an entire campaign and still have no guarantee of what the next sunrise would bring. An emperor could command armies, yet he could not command weather, disease, betrayal, death, or the decisions of another human being. And still, he had to act. Stoic strength was never the ability to predict tomorrow. It was the ability to remain governed when tomorrow refused to reveal itself. Imagine standing before a mountain at dawn, with thick fog covering the path ahead. You can see only a few meters in front of you. You could spend the entire day demanding that the fog disappear before you move. Or you could take the visible step and allow the next section of the path to reveal itself. The mountain does not owe you perfect visibility. Your responsibility is not to see the entire journey. It is to take the next step with enough courage and judgment to continue. This is where many dreams quietly die. Not because the person lacked talent, but because they demanded certainty from a future that could never provide it. They wanted to know the business would succeed before starting it, the relationship would last before committing, the career would work before learning, the audience would respond before creating. They wanted the reward to be guaranteed before accepting the risk. But if you require certainty before action, you will spend your life protecting yourself from the very uncertainty through which growth becomes possible. Seneca understood the danger of postponing life. We often imagine that someday, when everything is finally arranged, we will begin living seriously. But someday is one of the most seductive words the human mind has invented. It gives you the emotional comfort of intention without demanding the discomfort of action. You tell yourself you are waiting for the right moment, when in reality, you may simply be waiting for fear to disappear. And fear does not always disappear before courage. Sometimes courage is what teaches fear to become smaller. There is a difference between reckless action and courageous action. Stoicism does not tell you to walk blindly into every storm. The Stoic studies what can be known, prepares what can be prepared, accepts what cannot be controlled, and then acts. That is maturity. You don't need absolute certainty. You need enough clarity to make the next reasonable move. Wisdom is not knowing everything before acting. Wisdom is knowing what deserves your attention before you act. Think of an ancient archer preparing for a shot. He controls his stance, his breathing, his grip, his aim, and the tension of the bow. But once the arrow leaves his hand, the wind belongs to the world. He cannot chase the arrow through the sky and correct every movement. His responsibility ends where his control ends. Your life is filled with similar moments. Prepare carefully, act deliberately, and then release the obsession with controlling the outcome. When something fails, uncertainty often makes the mind invent catastrophic stories. One rejection becomes, "I'm not good enough." One failed attempt becomes, "This will never work." One difficult season becomes, "My entire future is ruined." But these are not facts. They are interpretations created by a frightened mind. The Stoic learns to separate the event from the story surrounding the event. A closed door is an event. There will never be another door is a prediction. Do not confuse the two. So move while your hands are still shaking. Begin while you still have questions. Take the opportunity while you are still afraid of failing. You don't need to know whether the entire road will be easy. You need to know whether the next step is worthy of taking. Because confidence is often not something you possess before action. It is something action gradually creates. And one day, when you look backward, you may realize that the moments that changed your life were not the moments when you had certainty. They were the moments when you had doubt and moved anyway. Lesson 10. Walk alone, but don't become empty. There is a dangerous misunderstanding hidden inside the idea of becoming independent. You can become so determined not to need anyone that you eventually stop allowing anyone to matter. You build walls and call them strength. You stop trusting and call it wisdom. You stop loving and call it emotional control. But the Stoics never taught that strength means becoming a stone. The goal was not to become incapable of attachment. It was to become incapable of losing yourself through attachment. The Stoics believed human beings were naturally connected to one another. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reflected on humanity as a shared whole, reminding himself that other people were not obstacles outside his life, but part of the same human community. That is important because nobody is coming does not mean nobody matters. It means nobody can live your life in your place. You can receive love without making love responsible for your identity. You can accept help without surrendering your strength. Think of a tree growing deep roots while its branches reach toward the entire forest. The roots give it stability, but the branches still reach outward. If the tree had only roots, it would become trapped beneath the soil. If it had only branches with no roots, the first serious storm would tear it apart. Your life needs both. Inner strength gives you the ability to stand alone. Human connection gives you reasons worth standing for. This is where many people get confused after being hurt. Someone betrays them, and they decide they will never trust again. Someone leaves, and they decide they will never love again. Someone disappoints them, and they decide they will never depend on anyone again. The pain becomes a philosophy, but one person's failure does not deserve the authority to define your relationship with the entire world. If betrayal teaches you never to love, then the person who hurt you continues controlling your life long after they are gone. Seneca understood that friendship could be deeply valuable, but genuine friendship should not be confused with dependence. A wise person can appreciate another human being without turning that person into the foundation of his emotional survival. This is the balance. Love people deeply, but do not hand them the responsibility for your inner stability. Walk beside them, but know how to keep walking when their path separates from yours. Imagine two warriors walking through a harsh landscape. They can share water, protect each other, carry part of the burden, and encourage each other when the road becomes brutal. But neither warrior can walk the other person's steps. One may eventually take a different road, fall behind, or disappear beyond the horizon. the journey continues. Real strength is being grateful for the companionship without believing your legs stopped working because someone left. And there is another level to this lesson. You must become strong enough to receive help without feeling weak. Pride can disguise itself as independence. You refuse someone's kindness because you want to prove that you can handle everything alone. But that is not always strength. Sometimes strength is knowing when to accept a hand, while still knowing that your life remains your responsibility. Self-reliance does not mean carrying every weight yourself. It means refusing to make someone else responsible for whether you keep moving. So build relationships from strength, not desperation. Choose people because you value them, not because you are terrified of being alone. Stay because there is mutual respect, not because you believe you cannot survive their absence. Love without possession, help without dependence, receive without surrendering yourself. And if someone leaves, let the pain be real without allowing it to become your identity, because eventually you will understand the deepest meaning of this entire journey. Nobody is coming to live your life for you. Nobody is coming to make every decision for you. Nobody is coming to carry your purpose to the finish line. But that does not mean you have to walk through life without love, friendship, or human connection. It means you walk with people by choice, not because you are incapable of walking without them. Stand alone when you must, love deeply when you can, and never abandon yourself to keep someone else beside you. Maybe nobody is coming to save you. Maybe nobody will arrive at the perfect moment, remove the obstacles, or carry you toward the life you keep imagining. And at first, that truth may feel painful, but after everything we have explored, you should see it differently now. Because when you stop waiting for rescue, you stop waiting for permission. When you stop depending on applause, you start building in silence. When you learn to stand alone, you discover that solitude was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to reveal you. You learn to take responsibility when life becomes unfair, to move without certainty when the future is hidden, to stop fearing being misunderstood, and to become someone you can finally trust. You learn that walking alone does not mean becoming cold, and independence does not mean rejecting everyone who loves you. It means building roots so deep that another person's presence can enrich your life without becoming the foundation of it. Marcus Aurelius could not control the empire around him. Epictetus could not control the circumstances of his birth. Seneca could not control the final direction of his life. Yet they understood something that remains true centuries later. You may not choose the battlefield, but you can choose the character you bring into it. You may not control the storm, but you can decide whether you become stronger while standing inside it. So when nobody believes in you, keep building. When nobody understands you, keep walking. When nobody applauds you, keep working. When someone leaves, let yourself grieve, but do not abandon yourself with them. When fear tells you to wait, take the next step. And when you feel completely alone, remember that solitude is not proof that you have been forgotten. Sometimes it is the place where you finally meet yourself, because one day you may stop looking toward the horizon for someone to come and change your life. You will look at your own hands and realize they were capable of building all along. You will stop asking, "Who is going to save me?" and start asking, "What can I build with what I have?" That is the real meaning of nobody is coming, do it alone. Not that you need nobody, not that you should love nobody, not that you should reject help. It means you refuse to make your future dependent on someone else's arrival. Stand up, take responsibility, build quietly, keep walking. Because one day, You may look back and realize the person you were waiting for never came. You became that person yourself. If this video gave you a new perspective, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to stop waiting and start moving.